During the last major recession, I lost almost everything. And there are a few lessons I learned the hard way that I wanted to share in this video. And since there's a ton of talk about the next recession being inevitable if you watch the news, I thought it's an appropriate time to make a video like this. But back in 2008, 2009, this is when I was a freelance videographer. Basically, I was doing anything that would come on my plate. I would do corporate gigs, any commercial work I would get my hands on. I would work as a camera operator, as a AC. I was even doing a bunch of weddings, working on my own documentary film too that was funded through Kickstarter later on. But in 2008 specifically, the recession was happening, but it hadn't hit me yet. I had no idea what was going on, and I was doing pretty well. Surprisingly, I was doing well in 2008. But this was my very first year outside of film school, and I look back at my tax returns. I made $58,000 in 2008, which at the time, I remember thinking, holy crap, I'm making a ton of money and everything's up and up from here. Everything's just gonna go up every year. I'm gonna make more money. Everything's gonna improve. I'm all set. And this is only a year outside of film school. And in 2007, when I was in film school and graduating, I was kind of panicking. So it seemed like everything worked out pretty quick. But then in 2009, everything pretty much stopped. I almost had no work. What happened was two of my major clients, which basically was all my freelance work, they basically just completely dried up. They couldn't even pay the bills that I was owed. I had done a ton of work. They couldn't pay the bills because they had no money coming in. They overextended themselves, right? And there was no freelance work coming in. Luckily, I still had a few weddings, but not that much was going on at all. And it felt like overnight. So at this point, I was literally willing to do whatever. So I was like, okay, I'll just be a production assistant again. That's what I did in 2007. But I couldn't even find work doing that. Basically what happened, and this happens during recessions, is most companies, if you're working in the corporate commercial type of world, even sometimes in narrative and entertainment world too. A lot of companies though in the corporate commercial world pause or slow down their spending pretty significantly. That makes sense for a recession. But it really hits us as people working in those industries. So I make marketing and advertising type videos, right? So that work dries up pretty quickly. And then it kind of slowly hits everyone in the industry. So it hit me a little bit later because I just wasn't working for those bigger clients that started cutting their budget quicker, right? They saw what was happening. They cut budget, and then by the time it came to my size clients, they started doing it, everything dried up. So bulk of my work, basically, between those two clients. But those few weddings got me a little bit of money to keep going, right? The thing was, though, at that time, I was also trying to wrap up my wedding business. That's what I did in 2007, 2008. Didn't really like it, so I was trying to wrap that up. So that had slowed significantly, too, just because I was in a transition period, had no idea about the recession, right? 2008 was great. Some of my documentary work I was doing that didn't really pay much on the filmmaking side, right? So that wasn't gonna pay the bills. So then there were multiple times in 2009 when the first of the month came, I could literally not cover my rent. And at the time, my rent was $700 a month. I couldn't pay it. And I remember, because literally every month I was just checking my bank account. By December 1st of 2009, I remember this super clearly, when I did the books, basically, when I added up in the Excel sheet that I was keeping track of how much money I made, I had literally only made $11,000. That's from January 1st, 2009 to December 1st, 2009. Some things came in later in December, but up to that point, I remember $11,000, which obviously I had to spend all to keep up, just paying my rent and paying bills and everything else, right? But the only reason I was able to even make it through to that point was in 2008 when I had made $58,000 and my expenses were pretty much, as low as you could make expenses. I was able to have enough money saved up to survive through the end of 2009. If in 2008, and I don't know even to this day, I can't figure out why I did this, but in 2008, I had saved up a significant amount, okay? So I was able to survive, basically weather the storm through 2009. But at the end of 2009, the top 3 clients that I had either all gone bankrupt or they were just working on something entirely different. They basically shut down their company because it wasn't working and they didn't need video anymore. Everyone, just about everyone I talked to was going through the same thing. I knew photographers that were going through transitions too. They were getting hit the exact same way. Videographers, filmmakers, everyone was going through the exact same thing. And most of the people that I knew, that was their end for them. They basically had to get unrelated jobs, right? Unrelated in the field or creativity. A lot of them worked at restaurants and things like that. So a couple of important lessons I learned through that I wish someone had just told me. But one was, when times are good and when money seems like it's flowing in and things are just going to keep getting better from here, don't think it's always going to be that way. So always think about that rainy day, because that rainy day, that season of downturn almost always comes. At some point in your career, it's going to hit you. So if you're not prepared for it, if when times are good, you don't really prep for the bad days, it's going to be a problem. And I accidentally did this in 2008 by just happened to save a lot of money, even though I thought things were going to get better. And that helped me survive 2009. The second thing I learned was, don't rely on one or two clients, which most of us, and it took me a long time to get out of this, we rely on one or two major clients for pretty much all the revenue, all the bills that we have to pay, right? So if the work dries up, if that one client through a recession goes bankrupt, in my case, all of them basically went bankrupt or just stopped doing business, okay, it's really hard to replace that with anything else. Because typically, most of us, we don't have any kind of system. At that time, I had no system. I hadn't really been doing ads or any type of SEO or outreach. So what was I doing? Well, I was getting my work through word of mouth, like most of us are. And it takes a while for word of mouth to get replaced, right? I could run an ad and get a client within a week. I couldn't do that at the time, though, with word of mouth. It took a while. So when clients dried up, well, if I didn't have some kind of reserve to get me going for the next 3-6 months, I couldn't replace that kind of income that I needed to pay the bills. So I learned from that lesson is, hey, if you have one client that's paying all the bills, if you have two clients that's paying all the bills, it's time to panic and actually try to get more clients and diversify, okay? Now, the third lesson was, and this just happened because I was young, my expenses were low, but keeping your expenses low until you have enough resources to justify any expansion costs, to buying more gear, to hiring employees, to get in a fancy office, or any office really, right? Don't bloat your expenses, because when you do that, and when things basically get to that point, which is kind of inevitable, at some point you're going to hit a hard time, right? It happened with COVID too, but that kind of, I had a quicker rebound from that. But in 2008, 2009, for most people, the rebound was very slow, right? I didn't really recover till mid-2010. So once you have diversified, which right now I have a ton of different income sources, I have a ton of different clients. If I lose a client, almost nothing happens to my business, right? And I've also managed to keep my personal expenses below relative to my income, so I could keep things manageable. So if the downturn comes, I don't have to fire anyone. I don't have to really make any major cuts, because this is something I pay attention to all the time. So I've prepared for the storm for a long time, and that's the lesson I learned way back in the day, to always prepare for the storm that is inevitable, which in this case, it may or may not be, but there's no reason not to prepare for it as if it is, if you're listening to everyone else that's an expert on the topic. So if there is a looming recession, it's time to prepare right now, not when the recession starts. So cutting expenses, saving where you can, trying to get more clients so you're not all in on one or two clients, just figuring out more revenue sources that you could bring in that are not tied to your major revenue source right now. Even though I learned the most important lesson in my business in 2009, through that recession, I still wish that there was another way to learn it, because it was a really tough time for me to go through, and it's really prepared me for the next one. But I still, to this day, even though it's been 14, 15 years, remember a lot of the pain that I went through back in 2009. So hopefully this video is somewhat useful for you and you could make some adjustments if some of that resonated with you. I'll see you on the next video.